Here they come. Well, some of them anyway. Hi everybody, my name is James and I'm a Renaissance guy. And what that means is I like to do a little bit of everything. And today I want to talk to you about this chicken coop that's behind me. How I built it, why I built it the way I did, and most importantly, what mistakes I made so that if you are using this chicken coop as a template, you won't make some of the same mistakes that I did. If you like this sort of thing, please be sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and ask me any questions you may have in the comments. So, without any further ado, let's talk about how I did this. So let's talk about how this chicken coop is platformed and framed. So I decided to set this chicken coop on top of a hard platform to prevent any predators from being able to dig underneath the coop and get to the chickens. So that's why it's up on a wood platform. And so I'll start by talking about how this platform is built. So it is basically a simple 4-foot by 8-foot platform with a lid that is 3/4 of an inch thick plywood, the full 4-foot by 8-foot sheet. And then the frame has 4-foot pieces of 2x4 on the ends with 93-inch or 7-foot 9-inch pieces in between them. And then every 2 feet, there is a piece of 2x4 in between the two 7-foot 9-inch pieces, and those are 3-foot 9 inches or 45 inches each. And they're spaced on 2-foot centers. So a little bit further apart than the studs would be in a house, which would be 16 inches. These are 24-inch on center. Everything is pressure treated, and that's because of the weathering of it. And everything is assembled with deck screws. In this case, 3-inch deck screws for the frame of the platform and 1 5/8-inch deck screws for holding the 3/4-inch lid down to the platform. The far side of the platform is just sitting on the ground. The front side of the platform is on legs and sitting on top of concrete blocks because I'm not on a level surface, but this platform is level. So let's talk about the framing of this chicken coop. The frame is entirely 2x2s, and if you're familiar with construction, you know that 2x2s are actually not 2-inch by 2-inch, but 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. These, just like the platform, are pressure treated, and they are assembled with 3-inch deck screws. So I want to give you a complete cut list for each of the pieces that you see there, as well as a little bit of information about how I went about assembling it. I did have some assistance in putting this together from my kids, but I was able to do most of this by myself with a couple of times I had one of my kids helping me hold something in place while I screwed things together. So let's go up there and I will show you what everything is and how long each piece is. Okay, so now we're looking at the coop from what will be the door side. And so let me just give you a cut list for what you see here. And that cut list of 2x2s is 2 pieces at 93 inches, 2 at 75 inches, 2 at 70.5 inches, 1 at 69 inches, 2 at 68.5 inches, 2 at 67 inches, 3 at 42 inches, 6 at 39 inches, 2 at 28.5 inches, and 2 at 16.5 inches. And we'll walk through and talk about where each of those pieces are. So to start with the longest pieces, I'm walking in. Those two there and there that get attached to the platform are the 2 longest pieces. Those are the 93-inch pieces. And then the next longest, which are the 75-inch pieces, are these top pieces up here, 1 and 1 over there, that run most of the distance along except for where the nesting boxes will end up being. The two next longest ones at 70.5 inches are the uprights on the back end, which is higher to allow for the slope of the roof. So that one there and this one here are the 70.5 inches. And then the one that's 69 inches tall is the one in the middle that runs from the top to the bottom in the center of the back. The reason why that one's not as tall as the ones on the ends is that the ones on the ends you see go all the way up to the top there, while the one in the middle ends right here. It butts up against this one. And if you're looking closely, you see I've scabbed a piece here. That's because I cut this center one 2 inches too short. I misfigured when I was drawing up my plans. I forgot that this side was higher than the other side. So I've scabbed in that 2-inch block. But you don't need to do that because you know better. And this one here you see goes all the way up to the top rather than terminating at the bottom side of this. So then if we look at the next longest pieces, the 68.5 inches, that's the two corners on the other side. So there and there. And then the ones that are 67 inches are the middle of the shorter height side. And then this one, which is running next to the door. So those are the 67-inch pieces. 42-inch are going to be that one way down there in that corner because that runs the full width of the coop, as well as this one here that's on the top back end. You see it runs all the way to the ends. It doesn't terminate at these little pieces. It terminates all the way to the side. And then the other 42-inch piece is this one here. Oh no, my microphone cables are in the way. And then our 39-inch pieces, the 6 of them are these pieces here. This one in the front here. And what these are is these are forming the edges of the actual coop part where the chickens will be able to stay. And those are 39 inches as well as that guy up there. It would be 42 inches, except that unlike the pieces at the end, which go all the way to the sides, these 39-inch pieces terminate on the inside of these 2x2s. And so that's where that is. And then going down to our last couple of lengths, our two that are 28.5 inches are these uprights here underneath where the nesting box is going to be. And our 16.5-inch pieces are these shorties right here, this guy and this guy. And then a couple of other things that are important to tell you are that number one, the distance between some things. So I'm down here in the corner underneath where the nesting box will be, and the distance for when you're screwing this together is 16.5 inches between this side of this one and this side of this one. Same thing on the other side over here, 16.5 inches from there to there. And then 39 inches in kind of the next section between this side of this one and this side of this one. And then the last couple distance measurements here is 34.5 inches from here to here. And then I decided to give myself a 2-foot wide doorway right here. So there's a 2-foot space between the inside of this to the inside of this for that upright to be attached. So you're probably looking at this and wondering, how did you go about assembling this so that it didn't just all collapse on you while you were trying to put it together? So here's what I'll tell you. Basically, I made 4 sections individually as separate pieces, and then had assistance in putting those 4 sections together. So the first section that I built was this side that we're looking at right now, which is the side that's going to be the doorway entry. And so that was basically a rectangle with an extra 2-inch piece sticking out of the top. And I've got a picture of just that piece. But then what I also built is I also built the 2 sides over here as separate pieces. And I've got a picture that includes all 4 of the pieces put together, as well as one little tiny U shape, which is at the very back, which is where that piece right underneath where the nesting boxes will be. And so I built those 4 sections and then had my daughter help me hold them up while I screwed those sections together, and then came around and added some other pieces. Here's a picture of what it looked like when I just screwed those 3 sections together. And so you can kind of see what that looks like. And so that's the framing of it. That's how it's framed. One thing I did not mention, which I think is valuable, if you're looking at this, you might see that one of the 39-inch pieces at the top is angled, while the others are not. So up here, this piece is going straight across, this 39-inch piece is, but the next one is actually at an angle. It's meeting up at the top rather than 2 inches down. When I put this roof on, I'm going to have 2 2x2s actually attached to the roof, and I may show the roof as a separate video, that will kind of imitate that angled one. But in the meantime, I've only got one angled one up there so far. So if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to leave a comment, and let's move on to the next step. So let's take a look more closely at the nesting box. This nesting box is 42 inches wide, 18 inches tall, and 18 inches deep. And if I come up here, you'll see that it's made of 1/2-inch plywood, and I've basically made a little frame out of 2x2s that are sort of attached together as L's there, and then also at each divider I've got a little L out of a 2x2, and I'll include a picture of each of the individual pieces that I used to put this thing together, and eventually in a future video I'll put a top on it. But one piece I did have to add to the frame that I didn't include in my framing video is this extra piece of 2x2 that's attached between those 2 pieces of the frame. And this is going to be where the hinges attach on the top of this. So when I get to adding the doors to this thing, I'll have a video on that to show you that. But that's what that little framing piece is for. So let's go around to the other side. Oh, and before I do, I'll just say that after I built this separately, and then I attached it by putting screws up underneath. I don't know if you can see this right now, but putting screws up underneath, straight up through the frame into that. And so let's take a look at the walls on the main part of the coop. So here I am at what will be the doorway once I get around to adding a door to this whole thing. And I'm walking through it, and there is one wall to the coop. And all this is 1/2-inch plywood, just like the nesting box. And so I began with these 2 walls on the sides. And basically I just cut them to fit and I screwed them in at the bottom and then up at the top. And because this side is 2 inches taller than the other side, because of the pitch that I want on the roof, this piece is taller than that piece. Both of these pieces are 39 inches wide, and this one over here is 48 inches tall, and it's flush to the framing piece below it and the framing piece at the top, which means that this one over here is simply 39 inches by 46 inches. Again, flush with that framing piece at the bottom and that framing piece at the top, and it's just screwed to them top and bottom. And then I added a wall in between those two, above where the nesting box is. And not only is it screwed in at the framing piece at the bottom and the top, but I've also got these 2x2 blocks here just to make sure that it's tight on the sides as well. And that also helps make this piece a little tighter on the sides because it was just screwed in on the top and bottom. At the top of that wall piece, the left side where I'm pointing is 2 inches taller than on this side because we're going to follow the slope of the roof with that. And then I've got another little piece that's fitting in between here and there that's screwed into these bottom framing pieces. So that forms that wall on that side. And if I scoot on back, you see this piece here, which is sort of the main entrance to the enclosed wooden part of the coop. And that also fits in between those two side pieces, which means that it is 38 inches wide, because it would be 39 except for the two pieces that are already there, the 1/2 inch plywood on either side. Up at the top, like the one at the back, it's cut at an angle to match that framing piece right there. It's screwed in at the top and the bottom. And I used a jigsaw to cut out this 16 inch by 24 inch opening, which will have a door on it that can open and close, so that I can close it at night and keep it from getting too cold in the winter and stuff like that. And there's also eventually going to be a ramp that comes down that you'll see in a future section of this video. But basically all that is just 1/2 inch plywood that's screwed into place on those framing members with those little blocks there and there to, same thing on these ones as well, to tighten up those edges. And if you have questions about any of this, feel free to put that in the comments and I will reply. Okay, so it has been a month since I recorded the last segment, and a great deal has happened. The coop is now complete, and I've got 6 chickens in it. 2 are adult laying hens, and 4 are just a couple months old and will probably be laying here in a few more months. So let me talk to you about what has been added since the last video segment. There are many things. I don't necessarily remember all of the measurements because I completed this thing a couple of weeks ago and have just been kind of seeing how it goes and tinkering with it since then. So let's talk through what I did since the last video. Number 1 is the roof. There is now a roof on it. It's just another piece of 1/2 inch plywood. It's the full 4-foot width, so it overhangs a little bit on either side. And the whole thing is 80 inches, 6'8" long, so that it overhangs there on that end a little bit, so that if it does rain, there's not a lot of rain getting down onto the seam over the nesting boxes here. So the roof is number 1, and I just cut that to that dimension of 6'8", 80 inches, and then screwed it down from the top into the 2x2s. So that's the roof. The next thing that I did is I added vent windows. There's one here and there's one over on the other side. I can't remember how big those are. I just kind of decided on a measurement. There's not necessarily a right or wrong size, but they're just hinged in place up there, and they are held open with a hook and eye. I don't know if you can see that hook and eye from here, but they're held open with a hook and eye that's attached to the window as well as the roof. And there is hardware cloth attached from the inside so that no predators can get in through those windows. But those are meant for venting. And as you can see, there's another one of those windows on the other side. The nesting box, I made a lid and hinged it in place here using that piece of 2x2 along the top. The first lid that I put on this was just a straight up 1/2-inch ply lid that just sat on top of the nesting box. And because 1/2-inch ply is thin, as it weathered, it started to curl. And also because it was sitting perfectly flat, when it rained, a lot of rain was falling down the back of it into the coop, and I didn't like that. So I built a little frame for it, and just like I put a little bit of a pitch on the roof of the overall thing, I put a little bit of pitch here. It's a little bit taller on this side than on this side. So I built a 1/2-inch ply frame and attached the lid on it. This is the first lid I put on it. That's why it's hanging over the side. I didn't want water to get in through that crack when it rained. Also, I wanted to be able to have a spot to lift from. And then there's also another support piece in here. I'll go ahead and open this. And there's a support piece in the middle. So that's what the frame of that looks like. And it's just hinged at the top to come down. I've also got a hook and eye on this. There and there, so I can lock the nesting box open if there are any eggs in it. And at the moment, there are not, but there's a little bit of straw in there. Additionally, I added hardware cloth around the entire outside of the coop. And you may notice, if you're looking really closely, that some pieces of the hardware cloth are attached on the outside, and some pieces, like this one, are attached on the inside. And there's not a particular reason for that other than which seemed right at the time based on the amount of hardware cloth I had. I had originally wanted to put this one on the outside, but it wasn't quite long enough to get around the outside of it, so I ended up stapling it in from the inside. But it still works, keeps the chickens in, keeps larger predators out. Another thing that I added since the last video is this litter tray here. And let me make sure I don't have any chickens up in my coop right now. Okay, they're all down here. But this litter tray slides out, and this holds the pine shavings bedding on the inside of the coop. And so you can see underneath, maybe, I added a 2x2 on either side of it, and as well as a 2x2 here. So there's basically like a stringer of 2x2 holding this thing up that are attached to these uprights, as well as a 2x2 in the center, underneath the center of it. And the way this tray is built is it's just a piece of 1/2-inch plywood with a ribbon of 2x2s around it. So just like most of this coop, it's built out of 2x2s and plywood. One of the challenges I have is that if I don't slide it in exactly right, it gets a little bit stuck. So I've got to get it exactly right when I'm trying to put it back in again. There we go, now it's back in again. And I've got a little handle on there to be able to open it up. All right, so now we're gonna go around the coop. I gotta hop down off my wall here and walk around. I added an extra outdoor run to the front of it, and I'll talk about that in a little bit once I'm done talking about the coop itself. The outdoor run is optional, but I decided I wanted to give the chickens just a little bit of extra space they could be in, even when there's not somebody out here keeping the ground predators away. So I built this little outside enclosure, which I'll talk about. But let's talk about the main door to the coop around here. This opening is 2 feet wide, and so this door is 23.5 inches. So I've got an extra 1/2 inch of space so that it doesn't get stuck in its place. I've just got 2 hinges on it. I've got another hook and eye here holding it on, and I've got just a little door handle, and just like the rest of the coop, I've got this hardware cloth stapled around it. And if I want the door to stay open, I can use this hook and eye and hook it to the chicken wire in the additional run when I open this thing up. One thing I will say before I move on, I added this little corner brace so that this isn't just a rectangle with a piece in the middle, because I wanted it to retain being square and not sink too much on this side. And I'm realizing that I need more. It is sinking on that bottom corner, and so it gets stuck on that bottom corner. So if I want it to close all the way, I have to lift up on the door when I close it. It's not the end of the world, but if I wanted it to not stick down there, I'd probably have to add these corner braces at all 4 corners. And since the last video, in the last video I mentioned that there would be a ramp. Here is that ramp. And this ramp is almost at a 45-degree angle. It's pretty steep. So I took some extra strips of 2x that I had left. When I took my 2x4s and ripped them down to 2x2s, I had these little tiny 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch strips left. And so I used those as treads. And so I tried not to waste anything. Other than those little treads, this, just like everything else, is 2x2s on either side and 1/2 inch ply on top. And it's just sitting there, and it's screwed in right here. And last video I had this rectangle cut out. I now have a door here. The door has those 2 hinges on it. And this is actually just the piece that I cut out of this when I ended up cutting this out. And in fact, you can see the hole that I drilled there and there for getting my jigsaw blade in there. But I just reused that same piece rather than cutting a new piece, and just hinged it and put it in place. Got a hook and eye here so I can close the door in the winter. But since it's been hot outside, I've just been leaving this door open all night and hooking this on the hardware cloth there. At night, I've just been closing this main door to keep any predators out. And if we look into the coop, so we see it now has that floor with the pine shavings in it. I've got 3 roosts, which are just 2x4s. So I've got one here, which is just below the nesting boxes, and I've got 2 higher up here. Now, I did read somewhere that chickens like to have their roosts higher than their nesting boxes. Otherwise, they want to sleep in the nesting boxes because they like to sleep in the highest place. So I've got 2 of them up there for them to sleep in. And that's pretty much it for the coop. As far as my feeding situation, I've got this big old water thing. It's way bigger than I needed in hindsight for my 6 chickens. But it's good to know they won't run out of water anytime soon. I've got them blocked up on this wood so that they don't get as much sand in it. Otherwise, they get it really dirty. And then I've got this one with feed in it for the adult hens. And then I've got that little one over there which has feed especially for the younger ones. At this point, the younger ones can reach up here, and so all chickens are eating both. But just to make sure the young ones are getting their nutrition, I've got that one and this one out, and they take their pick. And then way over here on the other side, I've got a little kind of portable roosting bar set up. My kids insisted on giving them something to play on, and so I just built that out of 2x4s and plywood. Something for the younger chickens to roost on, to learn how to roost, and they've enjoyed having a place in the run to roost. As far as the floor of this run, I've just got play sand on it, so it dries out quickly, and doesn't sit wet for long periods of time. Also, I've come to learn that it's actually healthy for the chickens to eat a little bit of sand. It's good for their gizzards, so that's what I'm using as my floor in the main run of the main coop. And so that is that. Again, hardware cloth is my hardware cloth is what I'm using on the outside of the main coop rather than chicken wire. The reason for that is that these 1/2-inch holes, I'm using 1/2-inch hardware cloth, and this thicker gauge metal is a lot better for keeping predators out than this traditional chicken wire with much bigger holes and much thinner metal. But let's talk a little bit about the run here. This run is similar in size to the other coop. It's 8.5 feet on either side, and then a little more than 3 feet here on the end. So it basically doubles the size of the amount of space that they have. Just like that, it's made out of 2x2s, and I basically suited it to my particular space. You can see I'm on a bit of an incline here, and so I had to kind of customize it for that space. So I'm not going to give you dimensions because of everything, because it's so particular to my space that it wouldn't benefit you. But basically, it's got 2 big sides that are chicken wired, that are 2x2s screwed together. They're attached, they're screwed directly to the main coop run over there. And then I've got this door here with the hook and eye closing it. The thing that I like about this door, and I've got those hinges there, the thing I like about this door is that I've got this other piece on the bottom underneath it, which holds everything together. Rather than just counting on posts to post both sides in, I also wanted to have this additional kind of triangular shaped piece to hold everything together, that this just closes above. Downside of it is that, you know, my kids like to sit on it and stuff, and I'm just not sure it's suitable for that. One of these days they'll break it, but it does the job. There's my dog. And so, yeah, if you have any questions about how I've done this, let me know. Before I go, I do want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that I would do differently if I could. If I was to go back and do this again, there are a few things that I would do differently. Thing number 1 is that I would hammer in all of my staples when stapling in all of my fencing. As it was, I just stapled it and moved on to the next staple. The problem is a lot of my staples, like here, have popped out, and so I've got a lot of spots just after a couple of weeks that I need to go back and restaple, because the staples, you know, as you can maybe see with this one, aren't quite as tight as they could be. And so it's not just there are some other spots. That's one thing I would do differently. Another thing I would do differently, if I come around here, is I would put my 1/2-inch plywood walls on the outside of these 2x2s rather than on the inside. I'm sure I had a reason for going on the inside rather than the outside, but I don't know what that reason is. Looking back, it may not have been the best choice, because if I had put it on the outside and flushed it to the outside, I would have been able to screw down the entire side rather than putting these little blocks on the inside, and it just would have made tighter seams with less draft. And so that's one thing I might have done differently. Another thing I might have done differently is this tray. It's pretty heavy and also very shallow, and so I might have, if I was to do it again, I might rethink this and make this 1x3 rather than 2x2, just to make it a little bit lighter weight and also a little bit deeper for that. And then if I come around here, I can demonstrate one thing that I would do differently is I would have taken better care to make sure I was using stainless steel for all of my metal parts, because as you can already see, there's already some rusting on this. And this hasn't been out here very long. So I'm either going to need to replace it in short order or continually hit it with some kind of anti-rusting agent. But I fear that this is not the only thing that's going to rust, that there may be some other things that are going to rust as well. But other than that, and here's a better look at that little play roost thing that I made. Other than that, it seems to be working. The chickens seem to be doing okay. And yeah, I'm happy to receive any comments that you may have. And I hope you've enjoyed this video and have learned something from it. Have a great day.